I'd often wondered about my heritage, but I opened the door and I walked into that little church, and the hairs just went up on the back of my neck and my whole body, and I thought, I'm home.
This podcast is proudly supported by the Ōtara Network Action Committee, ONAC, community-owned, community-driven and community-led.
Kia ora whānau, Judy Speight here again with the We Are Ōtara podcast. Today we're talking with Lex Dillon. Lex Dillon was once a young man growing up on Harwood Crescent, went to Otahuhu College and from there went to MIT, and that childhood created for him the strong foundation that led him to become, a true leader in industry in Aotearoa. Lex is really keen to share that story with our rangatahi so that they have a sense of the way forward. And for those of you listening that are looking for a way forward, or mum and dad are hoping you'll find a way forward, I think really some of what Lex has got to share with us is great help there. So please listen, please enjoy, please take Lex's experiences and his life as growing up as a proud son of Ngāi Tahu in Ōtara. Take them with you and know that they can be your experiences too.
Hey, Jude.
Hey, Lex, so good to have you here.
Thank you.
So this morning I'm with Lex Dillon. Lex and I know each other pretty well from relaxed summer days and even winter days, but never really talked too much about, where Lex came from, what he did. I did a quick Google this morning because, that's what podcasters do. I have Googled you now. Yeah. But I did know that you were a son of Ōtara and also a son of Ngāi Tahu.
Correct.
And that's pretty important for us. What we're doing here is that we want to bring our sons, Ōtara sons, back here to talk about their life and what happened in their life and what it was that made them great. And you are great. I know that. Great beyond the paddock. So I'd like you to share that story with me today in this conversation so that we've got, I think before we've called it a blueprint, but a pathway for the kids to follow, because many kids haven't got the vision that Lex Dillon had, probably from a young age. And we're not ready to admit that that's only Ngāi Tahu blood that took you there,
No.
not an Ōtara. So tell me about where it all started. Life on Harwood Crescent, it's not Harwood Crescent,
Harwood Crescent.
It is Crescent. It's a road that I drive down about 5 or 6 times a week. And it's, since we met you, it's been great delight that was your origins really for us.
Yeah.
So life on Harwood Crescent.
Life on Harwood Crescent. If I just crack back a little bit from there, so I'm the second son of a group of 4 boys.
Yep.
All of us born in Huntly. We were living in Huntly at the time because my mum's parents, my grandfather was a motor mechanic and he worked in the mines in Rotowara, and my dad was in the Navy. And I've got an older brother, Ross. He was born in 54. I was actually born in 55, less than a year after my brother.
We're not making judgments here.
No problem. And 6 weeks after I was born, my father was shipped off overseas, and he'd already been up and served in the Korean War. He was and he went back up to Korea and Japan, and also served in the Malayan conflict. And I didn't see him again until I was 2. So, he was away 21, 22 months, I think, on that trip. And that wasn't uncommon in those days. So effectively, my mum was a solo mum.
Yeah. So tell me, was your Ngāi Tahu whakapapa comes from mum or dad?
From dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, from dad. So Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about my mum and dad a fair bit through this because, they were a significant influence on my life. So my two other brothers, Craig and Brett, were also born in Huntley. And then my dad came out of the Navy 58, 59, something around about there. And he went one day down a mine in Huntley and decided working above ground was going to be a far better career option for him. And they looked around at that time and decided they needed to buy a house somewhere. Now, being a returned serviceman, my dad was able to get a very good value mortgage through the government, and also in those days, of course, you had the not family support. What was it called? There was money paid for each child that you had in the family from the government, and my parents were able to cash that in advance, and that helped them with a deposit for a house. And we moved to this flash new suburb in Auckland. I think it was February 61. When my parents built their little 3-bedroom house, made out of Huntley brick, of course, because that's where we came from, in Howard Crescent in Ōtara. There were a number of reasons, I think, not just that it was a new suburb. My grandparents, my mum's parents lived in Papatoetoe. My mum's sister, Velda, they lived in Luke Street in Otahuhu. My Uncle Jack was a foreman electrician at the brewery. And my Uncle Maury, who was my mum's brother, he was the guy that set up Otahuhu Welding and Engineering Limited, which is just around the corner, and Lovegrove.
So is he still there?
No, he passed away many years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Tony loves going down there.
Yeah. So he said. So we had some contacts in the air. And the other thing about, I was thinking about this. I didn't sleep very well last night, by the way. Not because I was feeling tired. I just had all these Ōtara things going through my mind. But there was quite a few families from Huntley moved into this area. I think there was a family called the Pedens in Preston Road. There was the Warrens, they were in Bed Street, and the McLennans, who were in Hope Place.
Yeah. This is the guy that Mum taught with.
Graham McLennan, who later became principal or deputy principal at Otahuhu College. Yeah. But he went, like I, went through Bed's Primary, Bed's Intermediate, and Hillary College. He was
a lovely man.
Yeah, great guy, Graham. Yeah. And so that was sort of how we ended up in Ōtara. And at the time in Howard Crescent, we were probably, I don't know how many houses are in that street, 40, 50 maybe. Could
then.
Be sorry.
Then.
No, now.
Goes up to, I'm going to say 70.
Could
maybe.
Be, yeah. But we were the
We were the
middle of the road and about the middle of the street, but we were also about the middle of the houses of being there. As you come into Howard Crescent, there's a little park on the left-hand side there, and anybody that grew up in Howard Crescent refers to that as the hill, because that was when the sections were being levelled off. This great pile of dirt got put there, and that park was known by the locals as the hill long after the hill got removed and been taken away.
Because everyone still goes to that park.
Yeah. But
they play, touch, and they play.
Yeah, one of the things too, though, we had such a great childhood. Growing up there. I mean, as I say, I was laying in bed last night and I was thinking, next to us were the Reynoldses, and then next to them were the Kellers, and the other side of them were the Johnsons. Down the end of the road there were the Tintinges, my mate Paul Salmon, the Gibbs. Across the road from us were the Kirklands, the Henaris, later to be Henari, an MP. The Walters, the Whites, further down the road, the Edkins, just the Dunlops across the road, and then coming back, the Martins, the Marinoviches, and then the Dillons. And all these different families all had kids, and all when I think about it, most of them were very similar situations to my parents. Sorry, I need to correct that. It was the Marinkoviches, not the Marinoviches. But very similar situations to my parents. Not many of the mums worked. Okay, most of them single income families. Most of the people actually owned their own homes. So there were some pensioner flats on the end there, but most of those houses around there were owned. A little bit different in Ashton Avenue and Edward Avenue. There were more public housing, state housing houses there. But it was great. It was one of those childhoods where, my parents would probably be chucked in the slammer now but we would get up in the morning and disappear and basically come home at night when we were hungry.
That was kind of growing up in the 60s, though, wasn't it?
Yeah. Or through the middle of the day, you'd turn up at somebody's house
for lunch.
And their mum would do lunch, and then you'd go home, and you might come home for dinner and disappear again. And the instruction was, you need to be home when it's dark, and you'd stretch that a bit.
Yeah, we got that too, yeah.
So,
but you did go to school.
Correct.
That's probably, anchor point number one.
Yeah.
Tell us about how important school was for you.
Well, I was one of those people who kind of loved school. I'm okay academically, but I'm really good conversationally. So I used to just. I remember one of my school reports. A teacher wrote something like, "Lex could talk the nails out of a floorboard." So I don't know whether how complimentary that was supposed to be, but I used to talk a lot, and I also had a huge interest in the world around me. Social studies was my favourite subject. History and geography were my favourite subjects by miles. And I used to love to read, and I still love to read. And I get constant grief from my children when they get in my car and I turn the radio on and it's the national program. And it's because I like the debate and the discussion.
The informed conversation.
And I learn stuff.
Yeah.
I learn stuff.
It's incredible.
So I enjoy music. I enjoy all sorts of music. But I really I like debate and discussion too. Yeah. So I'd actually started school in Huntley West Primary School before I left, and then we arrived in Harwood Crescent, and we were just around the corner from Beds Primary, now Beds Mainframe. I started there, and I wasn't the new entrant class. I was one on from that, and spent my primary school years through to what was Prima 4. Help me, what is that now? Year 4, 5 probably. Year 5 maybe
We've done
was.
This.
Yeah.
Well, more recently. Over to the producer of the spoon.
So anyhow, so through to that.
Standard 4, I think, was definitely year 6.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were, the thing that I valued the most about going to school in Ōtara was the quality of the teachers. And I'm not sure whether it's like that today, but certainly in the 60s and 70s, we had some of the finest teachers.
Beds Road's got this wonderful, proud history of being
I grabbed a few photos. I grabbed a few photos. And one in particular, 2 of them are Beds primary ones. And this is my 1964 photo. A couple of things I noticed from the 64 photo, if you'd have a look there. Firstly, there's 43 kids in that class photo. So, teachers in those days coped quite well with very large numbers of teachers.
Do you remember your teacher's name?
The teacher's name I remember very, very well. He's a guy by the name of Bill Potter. And Bill was the son of Dutch refugees who were in Jakarta at the time of the outbreak of World War II, and they fled Jakarta and ended up in Fiji, and then he came to New Zealand, and for a young boy, this guy was just our hero. He was in the army. He was a territorial soldier. He played rugby. He was first 5'8" or second 5'8" for the Papatoetoe senior rugby team at the time. And the best thing of the lot, and he got into big trouble was this, he used to bring us along milkshake flavourings for our milks. In those days.
You were supposed to be having that horrible milk that was always warm.
So, yeah. And the only way to make the stuff taste any good was to stick milkshake flavouring in it. And and I was a milk monitor too, so I knew how
early sign of leadership.
But it all came to a crushing end when a complaint came in from the milk department for the coloured stains in the bottom of the little half pint milk bottles that we all used to take. But he was he was a great teacher, and in fact, the last time I came across him was 5 or 6 years ago, and he's like a motivational speaker at conferences now.
Wow,
and a very good one as well.
Yeah.
But he went on to be like the worldwide president or something of something like the JCs, one of those service organisations, and that's it. So he was great, and Beds was one of the first primary schools in Ōtara. Sort of Beds, East Tamaki and Flatbush were all maybe within 12 months of each other. Ones like Clydemore and Yandara, they all came on later, as did Mayfield.
Yeah.
And Rongamai, I think. These other ones, they all came later on. But
so the primary school attached to Edmund Hillary, what was that called in those days?
There wasn't one. The only one, so Edmund or Ōtara College, as it originally was a standalone high school on its own. Basically the pathway was started at one of the local primary schools, went to Beds Intermediate, which is a separate school. That's down Ōtara Road on the left-hand side. It's now closed. I just stuck my nose in there now. Yeah. The woodwork and the sewing and the workshops are all boarded up, and the school hall is being used for something else in the library, that was something else. And then on to the college, Tangaroa College and Ferguson Intermediate, they all came along a little later on, which was kind of cool, because what it meant was by the time I got to Beds Intermediate, I had all these new groups of friends come in from East Tamaki Primary, from Flatbush Primary, and some of the others, But I'm not sure I mentioned before, but it was a very working class environment. I had lots of mates who worked in the substation housing with the Ōtara Power. The power station wasn't there at that time. This was pre that being built. And I had lots of mates in the substation there. It was really cool. So from Beds Primary, I went to Beds Intermediate. And for me, that was quite cool because my mum worked in the office. It's always handy.
If you forgot your lunch,
if I forgot my lunch, there was always somebody to make sure I didn't go hungry. I used to eat a bit in those days too.
But there wouldn't have been school lunches in those days.
Yes, there were.
There were?
Yeah. Oh, school lunches that you could buy.
Yeah.
I always remember, you have little memories about school, and the Catholic kids weren't allowed to eat meat on Fridays, so we could get fish and chips on Fridays, but also the ham rolls on the Friday. All the Catholic kids would take the ham out of the rolls, just to make sure they were compliant for that. And so that was another thing about those days too, is when you hit it's like intermediate and high school, your primary school friends often broke up a little bit and went off to different things. So, we ended up with the Catholic kids going off to De La Salle and Macaulay, and some other kids heading off to Papatoetoe Intermediate, was then Ōtara Intermediate, but changed its name to Papatoetoe Intermediate.
Oh, because it was before the motorway.
Correct.
Before they cut. Oh, gosh. It's hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just the motorway came from Papatoetoe and basically through the back of Ōtara, because it chopped off
yeah.
Waimondley.
Yes, it did chop off Waimondley.
Yeah.
And that was always, so those kids, some of those kids went to, Waimondley was one of the older schools too. In fact, I think it was actually there before Beds.
Wow.
You kind of forget about Waimondley and Larson Street, and all, even though I had lots of friends over there too. You do kind of,
but
those
an
kids,
artificial barrier with a huge road going.
Yeah, but it wasn't an era where as kids we either walked or we took a bike. We all had bikes.
So we weren't going to.
That was another one. I'm sure I didn't become. I'm not sure why I didn't become psychologically damaged by it, but in those days nobody knew anything, right? And everybody got second-hand bikes, and my brother got this really. He's at least, I say, he's a year older than me. He got this really flash bike,
First son.
and then when my birthday came around a year later, I got this bike, which I knew I was getting a bike, and I went there, but it was a girl's one. It didn't have the bar across the top. It had the, the thing through the middle. Nevertheless, it was a bike, and
I had to clean Mum's windows for my first bike.
I had it. You talking about cleaning windows. One thing, and I think it was because of the time, because of the years that we were there, but I always worked, like right from when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. And I think that...
So still at primary school.
This is still at primary school. Like, I had a number of paper rounds, and I did the courier on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and my courier run was from Ōtara Road through to the motorway. So that included Harwood, Ashton, Edward, Beds Road, and Lappington, Gilbert, and all the side streets off there. And, I'm surprised I don't walk bow-legged, because we used to have these canvas sort of sacks on the bike, and there was this unique way you'd load it up with papers. They'd drop bundles of newspapers at the Gilbert Road shops, ride down there, get the bike, load up, head off on one direction. If anybody had a fierce dog, I'll offer my apology now, because houses 3 either side of the one with the dog never got their couriers.
So how much did you get paid for that? Do you remember?
It might have been $1.50 or $2 a day.
And that was obviously after the 1st or 10th of July next year.
Well, yes, it was after that.
That's an old people's joke, producer.
Yeah, I remember that day distinctly, because there used to be all sorts of services in those days. Like you could get your bread delivered.
Yeah, but hang on, let's just go. I wanted to know kind of how much. What could you buy with your pocket money from, as an 8-year-old, from delivering the newspapers?
Well, it was not. So my parents came from that generation where they were very wary of debt, of borrowing money to do anything. So they would, the riskiest sort of thing my mum did was lay-by, whereby you put a deposit, you left it at the store, you paid it off over 3 months or 6 months, and then once you'd paid it off, you were able to go pick up that and take it home. So we were taught very good habits, very good savings habits. I remember they had a thing, I'm still an ASB bank customer, and it all came about by my sixpence saver that they gave me when I was like, I must have been 5 or 6 years old, and they were little cards, and they had a room for sixpence in it, and once you got up to 10 shillings, you could take it into the bank and they deposit it into your
and the cash
bank. And they used to have, cash came after the sixpence saver. Yeah, and do you
want to talk about Cashin just briefly? So
Cashin was an elephant that was sponsored by the ASB Bank, or the Auckland Savings Bank as it was, and he was at the Auckland Zoo, and he kind of became their emblem. And so they made up these plastic elephants, money boxes, and so I graduated from the sixpence saver to cash
Money
and
box.
money box.
And every child had
Everyone had
Yeah.
one, yeah.
Amazing.
But the other thing is, I talk about that sixpence saver, is one of the teaching jobs was on a Wednesday morning, all the kids would bring in their 5 cents or whatever it is and stick it in their sixpence saver, and then somebody from the bank would front up later on and collect this money from the and I'm sure that happened in every primary school in New Zealand, so, but it did teach us good habits.
Yeah.
Sadly, rightly or wrongly, I'm still with the ASB Bank. I'm not sure why, because some of the things they've done to me over the years. But there you go. It's loyalty. It shows you if you get them young, you keep them.
Exactly. Business tip number 1.
Yeah. So in terms of money, so I did that, but that was in the morning. So like you'd be up at 4 o'clock maybe to go out and do the bike round. I'm 10, 11, 12, 13. To do that one. But in the night, in the afternoons, also had a star run. Was
that every day?
That was every day. Yeah. Didn't have weekend newspapers then, so it was Monday to Friday. And there was a fella, and he was known as simply as the boss. And he had a Mark III Zephyr, and he would park around the back of the Ōtara. I'm just trying to think of Ōtara Town Centre. So on the side that faces the Manukau MTI, right? In that car park, he'd park up there at about 3 o'clock, I suppose, 3:30, something like that. We'd all go home from school, grab our bikes and our paper bags.
And your afternoon tea that Mum had made.
Yeah, that as well. Raw down to the to the shopping, probably go and buy a pie more likely instead of the afternoon tea, because we did have a bit of money. And we'd sit in the back of the boss's Mark III Zephyr until the truck turned up with all the stars. And the Star was a subscription newspaper, so you only delivered them to the people that were subscribed. What would happen is you'd load up your bike with the papers and head off. And I used to do for the newspaper, the Star deliveries, I used to do Ashton Ave, Natalie Place, Harwood Crescent, Lynn Place, Leslie Place, and Edward Ave. And that was a smaller one. And I think I used to get paid similar money as I did for doing the couriers as well. And as a
so you would, like, comparatively to people, kids that weren't working yet, you would have had quite a lot of money. Don't have to scam $5 from your sister to buy a pie.
I did, but we didn't get pocket money. The alternative was if I wanted the extra things that I wanted, I had to go and earn them myself.
Yeah.
And that included, like, in school holidays. I had some amazing jobs. I mean, the labour laws must have been way different. I remember working in a foundry in the third form.
Was that a local foundry?
No, it was in Penrose. It was one of my mates' mums worked for the company and got us a job for 2 weeks or something working in this foundry. And I don't know if anybody knows foundry work, but it's the dirtiest work that you've ever come across. It was Davies Pumps was the company at the time. And you used to have to shower after work because you just couldn't get on a bus or get it because you were so filthy dirty. And I remember we had a very multiracial workforce, and we had these skinny little white boys going into the showers afterwards with these huge Pacifica and Maori boys and everything, and the banter was pretty ribald, shall I say. But I also remember it was the first time I saw a Samoan man with the knee to chest tattoos, and that blew me away. I thought, well, I wouldn't mind one of them. It never happened though. But so I worked there. I just kind of worked everywhere, to do stuff.
So high school, you just
high school was interesting for me.
So hang on, Beards Road Primary,
Beards Intermediate, and then to Ōtara College.
Yes,
which was what it was when I was there in the third form. Yeah. And I'll just talk about a quick overview of my high school years,
Yeah.
and then I'll come back because I want to talk about the strengths of Ōtara/Hillary education system.
Yeah.
So I went to Ōtara College and really enjoyed it. In the third, what was the third form? So coming back, we're now talking year 8. I think it is now.
No, it's year 9.
Year 9. Okay. All right.
Intermediate 7, 8. No, yeah.
Yeah, 7. Okay, year 9.
So year 9.
Yeah. Ōtara/Hillary was so far ahead of the rest of New Zealand that time in education. So, the normal English, maths, science, but I did te reo in the third form there. I did technical drawing in the third form there. In the fourth form, my dad got transferred with his job, and we went to Whangarei. So I went to Whangarei Boys High for the fourth form in the first month or two of the fifth form. When I went to Whangarei Boys High was also a very good high school, but it was decades behind in its attitude towards its students. And I wanted to continue with te reo, with the Maori language. Didn't exist. You had French or Latin, but the concept of teaching Maori just did not exist, which is a shame because in the north there would have been a huge amount of kids who probably had te reo spoken at home.
Yeah.
But it was not an option.
Although it was their parents that had these skills beaten from them, of course.
Sure, I understand that. Yeah. And probably, therefore, from that, didn't encourage their children to want to continue with that. But the other thing I did was technical drawing, and I wanted to continue with the tech drawing because it interested me, and I wasn't too bad at it. But I could do technical drawing, but that meant I was taken out of the academic stream, because if you were doing technical drawing, then you were going to be a carpenter or something. So you're going to be a tradesman, and tradesmen didn't need to know academic subjects. So their approach to education was sound and good and worked, but it was actually behind the times. We were far better ahead down there. Now,
more prepared.
Yeah. So we were up in Whangarei for about 15 months. And during that time up there, my grandmother became unwell and that. But my mum missed Ōtara like hell. Like, you would not believe. It was home, that's where all our friends were and all our neighbours were, and, some shared family down there. That's right, yeah. And things like that. So, sadly for my dad's career, we came back to Ōtara again. And whilst I'd been away in the fourth form, Ōtara College had changed its name to Hillary College. Yeah. And still the same school, still the same headmaster, most of the same teachers there, And they were high-quality teachers. I know other people have said that about the schools there, but I think the proportion of those teachers that went on to be headmasters at other schools was huge. The original headmaster when we were there was a guy called Garfield Johnson. I think he was the foundation headmaster there. The deputy head was a guy called George Hammer. He went off to Tamaki College. You had people like Ian Mitchell, who ended up out in West Auckland, and Dunphy, who were Penrose High School. Just lots of things. The other thing I learnt about going to Whangarei Boys High is, man, does Ōtara have the best singers at school. Like, when you went to school in Ōtara and your song, you had assembly song, literally the building would almost shake sometimes with the volume and the enthusiasm and the passion of the singing. I went up to Whangarei Boys High and I remember going along to assembly and the first time in the singing, and I thought, we're going to be here for hours. This guy's not going to put up with us. I was just so used to the wonderful music, and I think that's something that continues on with. In Ōtara today, I've been privileged over the last 20 years to visit most of the Pacific Islands, and one of the things I always do when I go to a Pacific Island is make sure I have time free on Sunday to go to church. I'm not a particularly religious person, but the music is unbelievable. And
special.
Yeah. And it's different. It's a different style of music. And I still, I occasionally I'll, be in the area and I'll drive through Ōtara on a Sunday, and you can just, you can hear the singing from the churches as you drive by, and that was it.
Smell the hangi or the umu.
Yeah. So at the end of the fifth form, I got my school certificate.
Which is like...
in first level NCEA. Yeah. Got my school certificate. Went to go back to Hillary College in the sixth form, and ended up having a bit of a dispute with the school leadership over some textbooks that they claimed that I hadn't returned. And what I did was I went into the school book room. Those of you of my generation will remember that it was, things were low tech in those days. There was a stamp put in the front of the book, and you wrote your name, my case, Lex Dillon, and what class you were. And then at the end of the year, it got handed in. And so when you got a textbook, you knew who had had it for the previous 3 or 4 years. It was still like, anyhow, they wouldn't issue me textbooks until I'd paid for these lost textbooks. And lost textbooks.
Had you sold them?
No. I actually went into the book room, and I can't remember how many were missing. It was something like 7 or 8, Like it was pretty much they basically suggested to me that I hadn't handed my textbooks back. And I found all but one. I mean, I went through thousands of books. You can imagine a book room in a high school. I went through and I found all but one, and was told that unless I paid for that textbook, they were not going to issue me any books for the sixth form. Now, I had some very good... Harwood Crescent is quite handy to Otahuhu College. And half my mates had actually gone to Otahuhu College anyhow. And one of them said to me, "Why don't you come to Otahuhu College?" And I went back to my mum and I said, "No, they're not giving me my textbooks." And
of course, Mum and Dad has said you pay for them yourself. So
correct.
You lost them.
You lost them. You pay for them.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I didn't. I objected to paying for that, and so I ended up in Otahuhu College, and I had a ball there. A whole lot of friends. Now, 4 years, 4 different schools. Now, for some people, I think that might have destroyed them. But
particularly in their secondary school. Yeah.
But for me, it made me, because I got used to meeting new people. I got used to having to make new friends. Now, that's not an academic skill, but there's heaps of people out there that have got great social skills. And then what you've got to do is just got to find a job for yourself that you can make that work. So that's what I did. So I went to Otahuhu College, and boy, was that a win for the social life for the teenagers of Ōtara and of Otahuhu, because all my Ōtara mates ended up with girlfriends from Otahuhu College. And when we had the school balls and the like, there was this big interchange of people going between the two schools, which didn't happen before because there wasn't a common link. So that was kind of cool. So I completed my time at Otahuhu College. I got university entrance, which is higher level NCEA, I guess. Yeah, and what was required if you wanted to go on to university. And I got that accredited, so I didn't have to sit the exam. That was the...
You used your social skills to achieve that, no doubt.
Yes, day of my life. And decided I need to embark on a career. Now, because I always loved reading and loved books and history and geography, I had this idea that I wanted to be an archaeologist or an anthropologist. And that's really what I would have dearly loved to have done. And today I still would have dearly loved to have done that. But my mother was quite a cunning lass, and she suggested to me that I get the Saturday Morning Herald for a couple of weeks and look under A and see how many jobs there were for archaeologists and anthropologists. And as I got used to earning a bit of money through school holiday jobs and delivering newspapers,
you knew how important it was.
I knew. I soon found out that there were a bit shortage on jobs in the papers, but under the A, what there were lots of jobs for was accountants. And I had a friend of mine.
That's such a great story.
And I had one of my best mates, another Harvard Crescent lad. He was quite keen on studying accountancy. And he went off to Auckland University, but I decided to go the alternate route, and I went to Manukau Tech and studied accountancy there. And in my first year, I just about failed every subject. I must say I had a wonderful social life that year. And I think I passed that with flying colours. But it was a bit of a reality check for me. Mm. So I went back, I redid that year, second year, and got everything that I wanted to do, and then went off working. So,
and uni fees were free in those days, weren't they?
Everything was free, yes. Yeah, big difference. Yeah, it was free. It was a big difference. So you could fail and roll on really other than... I didn't do the seventh form at school anyhow, so no loss, really. To be frank, I wasn't mature enough to make that change at that time.
So you'd gone as a 17-year-old to university, or to Tech?
To Tech, yes.
Yeah, without that. And that's how they always said that about the seventh form year, 13, is that year where you can grow up a bit.
2 out of my 3 children, which I'll get onto that, they actually used that year and did gap years in the UK. And man, did that turn them into adults very quickly. So anyhow, I was still living at home with mum and dad in those days. So food and board was, it wasn't being charged any board or anything like that. But anyhow.
Yes.
So I went, my first job. Now, a little backstory from that was that I had a great mate in those days, a guy called Tony Lawrence. He was down the bottom of Larson Street over by Wailamondley Road. And his mum, Mary, was a very, very wise woman. And when I just told her I was going to be an accountant, she just looked at me and said, "You're never going to be an accountant." And I said, I sort of took it as a bit of a challenge, but she was dead right. I wandered from the accounting path a couple of years down the track. So I never graduated. I never graduated as an accountant, but I continued to study it, but just a paper here and a paper there, that sort of thing. So my first job was I worked for a company called Pipe Industry in Penrose, and I was there for 2-3 years. It was a great job, had a lot of fun. Probably the most interesting thing about that job was the managing director of the company was a guy called John Munro, and his father was Bert Munro, the world's fastest Indian guy.
Yes.
And I met Bert a few times, and I was a bit of a motorbike fan in those days, and he was kind of like a guy. He was a charming old man, I have to say, but had a great time there. It was during that period that I met my first wife. And she was a Pakuranga girl. Lived opposite where Edgewater College was.
Oh, yes, down by the water.
Yeah, and fortuitously, and I say within about 3 weeks of meeting her, they put the bridge across Tarakau Drive. Prior to then, the only way you could get from Ōtara to Pakuranga was I didn't have a car driver's license. You took a bus into the Harper Veron, which is in towards Green Lane, and then took another bus through Panmure back out to Pakuranga. Or alternately, there was no bus, but I could have probably got on my biked out the back roads to Howick and back around to Pakuranga. But so they put the road through. I met Robin, and
proximity, of course, is supposed to be a big thing in these relationships.
And got married in 77. Yeah, 77. I was always a keen traveller, and I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to see the world. As I say, I loved social studies. I loved other countries.
And your father been in the Navy.
Pardon? And my dad been in the Navy probably encouraged me for that a little bit too. Yeah. So
it wasn't that not that common, was it? for kids to go to I suppose it was.
It was starting to.
Yes,
yeah. Like the people who started doing those overland trips, from Kathmandu through to London and all those sorts of things. But it was at the era, like as a child, we didn't go away on family holidays overseas.
Yeah.
Like the money was not around to do those.
No.
We'd go stay in family places down in the Hawke's Bay and that sort of thing. They were other things. So, it made clear to me if I wanted to travel, I was going to be doing it on my own bat. When I met Robin, she was similar to me. She wanted to travel, and we ended up leaving New Zealand and spending a couple of years away. Lived and worked on kibbutzim in Israel.
Oh, wow.
Worked in London and worked in Iceland for 8 months. And you have things in your life that send little light bulbs off in your head. And I'll never forget working in Iceland. And I worked with a group of 3 guys. And I was almost like the sort of team leader. And
were they Inuit?
Sorry, no, they were Icelandic. So the Icelandics are all of Danish. They're Danish, Scandinavian descent. Yeah. And I worked with these guys, and only one of them spoke some passable English. And I used to struggle with communication with these people. And then in particular, and there used to be this one particular guy who spoke no English at all. And he'd be yelling and screaming at me and, get stuff in Icelandic. And I'd be struggling to understand what he said, trying to do what this guy was asking me to do with my limited knowledge. And then I thought back about my days in New Zealand when I worked with immigrants from the Pacific Island. And these people, they thought I was dumb. The Icelandics with me thought I was dumb because I didn't understand what they were saying. And I thought about when I used to work with new immigrants and I couldn't get them to understand with what I was saying, thinking that they were dumb. And that little light bulb went on in my head to say, you got to learn to communicate and understand with people. And just because somebody doesn't speak or do things the same way that you do doesn't mean they're dumb. I saw it from that side of the fence because I knew I wasn't dumb, but we couldn't succeed because we couldn't communicate.
Anthropological thing that it was always social anthropology that was always of interest to you anyway.
And in my working career and my years that have gone by, I've always worked really, really hard to be a good communicator with people and to sit back and look at it from their perspective of what it is that I'm saying and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And setting examples and showing people how things are to be done. Rather, what you learn is that volume is not a measure of success. In fact, it's actually an indicator.
Doesn't actually aid success either.
No, it's an indication of failure.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So spent a couple of years travelling the world.
So what did you change about how you were talking with people to do that? Obviously, with them.
Well, it was just
as the receiver rather than the.
So with me,
what did you do?
I became more tolerant
of them.
And
you didn't think that they were dumb.
Yeah.
But they were thinking you were stupid.
They were thinking I was stupid. Yeah.
They were stupid.
Yeah.
And
then, we just became more patient. People that know me think I'm maybe too patient and chill sometimes. But I've picked up a couple of philosophies as I've gone around the world. Is that I always look for the good in people, and everybody has got good. Even somebody that's being, dare I say it, an a-hole to you, there'll be something good about them. And if you focus on the good bit about them, it'll make the whole nasty experience, bearable.
I've written that down.
Yeah.
We use that on your billboard.
I'm retired now. And when I retired, I was involved with the horticultural industry for most of my career. And when I retired, I just gave a little presentation, and I said, I never met somebody in this world that I either didn't like, there wasn't something I didn't like about them, or something that I learnt from them. So you learn something from the nasty people, even it's not behaved the way that they are. So that's worth having. And so we came back to New Zealand, bought a home in Manarewa quite quickly. Sorry?
Where in Manarewa?
It was called Burlington Place. If anybody knows where the Manarewa Squash Club is, it was just sort of inland a little bit.
Off Oram somewhere?
It was off Browns Road, yeah. Inland a bit. Sort of, it's it's pretty. There's it's a network of little streets, and it was a nice home. We enjoyed it. I'd got a job with Avon Cosmetics at that time, and I drifted for my accounting. But what I was involved in there was inventory control and warehousing.
Well, logistics, as we call
logistics.
Yeah.
And I became their warehouse manager for Avon Cosmetics, and was there a couple of years.
So where was the factory?
Originally, the office, the manufacturing office, was in Charles Street in Papatoetoe in Hunters Corner. And I was originally there, but the factory and the warehousing was actually out in Pakuranga. So I was travelling from Manarewa initially to Charles Street, and then later on out to Pakuranga. I learned a lot at Avon, working from one of those big international American conglomerates is actually quite amazing. They have very structured ways of doing things. But I also learned that there was no way that I was going to have a lifelong career in a company like that. When I resigned, my boss came to me and said, Lex, what are you doing? We've got our eyes on you. There's an opportunity.
You could be the next branch manager.
Well, no, you could. We sent 10 people up to New York from Australia last year. You could be the next one to go up there. And I said to him, Bruce, of those 10 that you sent up there last year, how many are still there? He said, I'm not sure. I said, I am. There's one. The other 9 couldn't stand it. The American work ethic is unbelievable. They all lived about 2 hours away. The head office was in downtown New York. They all lived about 2 hours away, so they had a 2-hour commute in and out of work. And once they got there, they were expected to be there at the crack of dawn. And then if you were the first one to leave at night, there was sort of a little black cross put against your name. Yeah. And the Aussies are a bit like Kiwis, we like this, what do we call it, work-life balance. So I was never going to be going off to New York anyhow. But what I did do is I actually got a job as a customer service representative with a company called Chep. And Chep are the blue wooden pallets that you see around. And I was with Chep for 13 and a half years. Wow. I started as customer services. I became the Auckland regional manager. And then from that, I became the business development manager. And probably the biggest thing I did there was I worked with them and the then major supermarket chains in the produce industry to change over from shipping fruit and vegetables in New Zealand around in wooden boxes and cardboard boxes to returnable plastic crates. So it was ahead of its time, a concept in terms of being environmentally friendly and all those sorts of things. We weren't the first in the world to do it. The Tesco's and Asda's and the like were in the UK had been doing it.
So you'd looked at the markets and made this evaluation that it was more,
Did a couple of trips to the UK, looking at what they were doing over there, looking at how they were manufactured, all those sorts of things, and got their business up and going for them in New Zealand. I must have done a good job because I got headhunted into another company to do a similar job for them, and did that for a couple of years. When I got an opportunity to go and work for a company called KPH Produce, which is at Bombay. And I spent the next 25 years at KPH until I retired. that time is with Chep and with Wetpack, which was the other company I went to, and KPH Produce was in and around the horticultural industry. And I've got to say, I love the horticultural industry. It is so much fun. It's all about people. When it comes down to it, it's all about people.
But cultivating, growing,
tunuku. It's that, except for the soil is actually less important in growing today than it's ever been. So mostly the business I was in, it was called KPH Produce. It's now known as NZ Hothouse. They grew hydroponically, and they grow in anything but the soil, and grow in glass houses. The growing technology is unbelievable. I've never taken anybody into the glass houses. Like the difference between what you do with a tomato plant in your backyard and what a commercial tomato grower do is chalk and cheese. And and science, having an understanding of science, and particularly plant pathology and plant biology and that sort of thing is incredible.
So that would be my question about that. Is a tomato grown in a hothouse hydroponically, is that just as nutritious as something I've grown in my backyard?
Yes, it is. So if I just explain, so it becomes nutritious by taking up nutrients into the plant. Plant it doesn't matter to the plant too much where that nutrient comes from. If it needs calcium or it needs nitrogen or it needs sodium or it needs phosphorus, as long as it gets it from a source, that's fine. I think one of the things that does happen, though, with home gardeners is that with a home gardener, when they harvest and pick their vegetables and that, they have the smells of the plants on their hands. Like if you grow tomatoes, touch a tomato plant, just touch it. You don't have to rub it. Touch it and then smell your fingers. It just smells like tomatoes.
It does, doesn't it? I love that smell.
Yeah. And half of the thing about people, it's my belief, half of the thing about people who say, I really love the tomatoes from my home garden. Half of it is the smell that they're getting from their hands.
Is that a marketing opportunity?
Sorry? Yeah.
Tomato cologne.
Well, I once went to a supermarket in Shane in the UK where they were piping the bakery smell through the supermarket. And when they did that, it increased their fresh and hot bread sales like 50%. So yes, smell.
Well, I walked past a restaurant the other day and it was like a hot pot kind of restaurant, and instead of, you could smell the barbecue taste smells coming out, and I'm sure that's intentional. So interesting science.
Yeah.
Really interesting science. So you didn't try to do that in New Zealand supermarkets?
No. I'm not sure that. I've got another friend of mine, another Ōtara boy, who has got a cosmetics or manufactures soap and candles in Australia. Told you about him. And he once made a tomato soap and he said it was the worst selling soap he's ever had. Capsicum ones went good, cucumber ones went good, tomatoes just
keep the tomato in the garden.
Tomatoes, no, it was not a winner. Yeah,
isn't that interesting?
So I started in that business selling hydroponic lettuces to supermarkets and hydroponically grown lettuces. The company I was with at the time, we weren't actually growing. We were a packer and marketer and distributor. So we collated product from a wide range of growers, and we graded and packed that product and then sold it off primarily to the supermarket chains. Then what happened was there was quite a change in supermarkets and some consolidation in the supermarkets in New Zealand. And they were looking to buy direct. So in the early days, used to sell through the wholesalers, the turners and growers, the market gardeners, those sorts of things. But those guys couldn't always supply what the supermarket operators want. So what the supermarkets decided to do was form relationships directly with growers. When that late 90s. And when that happened, growers had to be able to ensure continuity of supply because the supermarket didn't want to phone up and say, I need 10 tons of tomatoes delivered tomorrow, and say, look, I can only give you 2. That's all I've got. So the way to overcome that was to grow it and supply it yourself. So the guy that owned the business that I worked for, he had gone to school with the son of David Levine, the late Sir David Levine. Yeah. Mark was his son's name. And he approached David and said, David, I need some help to get going into production. Would you be interested in investing in the business? And so he did. A big block of land was built. In the first year, we built 5 hectares, which is just over 10 acres. Yep, 10, 12 acres of glass. Then the next year, we built another 5. And then 2-3 years later, we built another 9.
And this was all lettuces, or was that?
No, in those days, it was tomatoes, capsicums, and cucumbers. And so the business today has about close to, 20 hectares, 50 acres of modern glasshouse growing.
So where is it?
There are 2 production sites, one in Karaka and one in Bombay. If you're heading over the Bombay Hills, look on the right-hand side. Yeah, just before you get to McDonald's on the right, there's a big glass.
Between St Stephen's and McDonald's then?
Yes, between St Stephen's and McDonald's. Gotcha. Yep. Next time I look at the glass houses, and that's where I work. And look, it was great. So not long after I was that all happened, I became a director of the business. I was involved in those early days, mostly in sales and marketing, negotiating with the supermarkets. Incredibly mentally stimulating doing stuff like that. When you've got a big tomato production facility like that, we could produce on a really busy day, or a really busy week, 250 tonnes of tomatoes. 250 tons. That's 250,000 kilos of tomatoes. And what happens is you're picking 6 days a week. So just for simplicity, let's say it's 6 days a week, 40 tons a day, that's 240 tons, right? Yeah. So on Monday, which is a lot, 40 tons a day it is, right? Yeah. So on Monday you pick 40 tons. On Tuesday, you pick 40 tonnes. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you pick 40 tonnes.
And the continuity is because everything's inside.
Because the plants are continually producing. So on Monday, tomatoes, the wholesale price of them might be $3 a kilo, right? And if you sell the 40 tonnes, you'll get $3 a kilo for them. But if you don't sell them and maybe sell half of them, and you carry them over to Tuesday, then you got 60 tonnes to sell because you got the 20 tonnes from yesterday plus the 40 tonnes that you're picking today. Yeah. And just say, for some reason, you sell nothing that day. Next day, you've got 100 tonnes of tomatoes. And
then you've got a bigger shoot.
Right. So the stuff that you've got on Monday might be worth $3. By the time you get to Friday, you're selling tomatoes for $1 a kilo. Okay. And they cost you $2 a kilo to grow.
We see that in the food rescue business.
Okay, you do. You see it in the food rescue business, but you also see it in the supermarkets, like right at the moment. Okay, there's not an oversupply. The weather conditions have made, even within glasshouses, the weather conditions have made it difficult to grow. So therefore, the prices are high. But there will be a day around the corner when production will come in, the sun will come out, everybody will be planted up, and the price will come down again. So the advice there for shoppers out there is buy what's seasonal and in plentiful supply. Doesn't matter, you might have gone into the store to buy tomatoes, but if it's broccoli that's cheap, buy your broccoli that day and get some tomatoes the next time, because they will be cheap somewhere along the line.
People might go poo-hoo with that, but actually it's what our mums did.
Exactly.
And it's so much better, just because, whoever's cooking the spaghetti bolognese sees tomatoes, well, get a tin of tomatoes. Exactly.
If you want to be cheap. Now, the downside of that is you don't know where those tomatoes have actually come from. No matter what the label says on the tin. It will say the country of origin on the tin, but chances are if they're canned, they're not from New Zealand. And the other thing about canned tomatoes is they've got, the reason that they can often taste very good is they have salt added to them. And
they're not good for you.
So they're not so good for you. But if you're needing to feed a family, and that they will still be good for you, just not as good as the fresh ones off a
that you
off a
paid
barn.
$18 a kilogram for.
Correct.
Yesterday. So, okay, stimulating, amazing career. What's in your future, Lex? What are you doing now? You've retired. What's on your horizons?
So I quite surprised during my time in the tomato industry. I became involved in industry affairs, just like for the way dairy farmers and cattle farmers have federated farmers. Growers in New Zealand, that's vegetable growers, peach growers, kiwi fruit growers, apple growers, etc. We have an industry organisation called Horticulture New Zealand. So does the same job, lobbies for the interests of farmers or horticulturalists in New Zealand. And, in the last 20 years, the horticultural industry export has had the fastest growth of any product group in New Zealand, and also includes grapes, which gets turned into wine, but technically that's horticulture. So it's horticulture as a exporter has grown significantly through that time, it's a fascinating industry. So I was 23 or 24 years on the board of Tomatoes New Zealand, which is the tomato area of the business. And out of the blue for me, as far as I was concerned, in 2021, I was made a life member of Horticulture New Zealand, which was a real honour for me. I'm a bit of a humble person in that context, and I still to this day not quite sure why they honour me with that, but nevertheless, that happened, and as a result of that, I have been working with the industry on some research projects. And I'm not a research scientist, but what I am is a person who has worked in the industry for 35 odd years, and I know what works for growers and what doesn't. Sometimes when you get research projects, it's really good for science, but it's not practical to use in a real world situation. So what I'm doing is there are a number of projects going on to grow in more friendly ways. Okay, so to use less sprays.
To the sustainability focus.
To focus on
We're big on
what,
that in Ōtara.
and what we are currently doing is I'm working with some researchers who are looking at biological pest controls. So looking at natural ways of controlling pests, things like whiteflies, things like potato and tomato psyllids, which are pests that actually devastate home gardeners, but the home gardener doesn't realise it. They just have a crop failure and they're not sure why. And it's because the pests have been in there. But every pest has a natural predator somewhere. The issue that we have is that because most of our pests come from overseas, the pests get in, but their natural predators don't. So just like rabbits and deer and those sorts of things, because they don't have natural predators, their populations explode. And what we are doing is identifying either native species of beneficial insect or introduced species of beneficial insect that are already here within the country. And so that's one of the things that's keeping me busy.
So who's the research organisation you're working with?
So there is a group that has been set up within the horticultural industry, and it's called A Lighter Touch. So, and everything is as in the name. So what it's looking to do is to find, as I say, environmentally, sustainably friendly interventions for pest control that already exist within New Zealand.
I really love that.
And it's a neat project, and it's a fun project. It doesn't take up too much of my time. The other thing I've forgotten to say is I had I've got 3 lovely children, a son and
Don't
his
forget the
partner.
kids.
No, did not forget the kids. Son and his partner who live in Pukekohe. My daughter, who has recently moved to Christchurch. She's working with Immigration New Zealand down there. She was involved in the travel and tourism industry, but she's moved down there and is loving Christchurch and is hoping to buy herself a home, which she couldn't do when she lived in Auckland. Yeah, and my middle son and his wife live in Bandar Seri Begawan, which is the
I remember you went there last year, didn't you?
yes, which is the capital of Brunei Darussalam.
Yeah.
I have 2 grandchildren there. They're 3 and just about to turn 5. So my plans when I retired was to try and travel a bit, and particularly to go up and spend time with my grandkids and my son. But that got hammered for 2 years. I did manage to sneak up there and came back and had the joys of 2 weeks in MIQ and all that sort of thing. But so I plan to travel a little bit, but I lost my first wife. She passed away suddenly about 6 years ago now, and I was, how old was I? I was 61, and that caused me to have a little bit of a reassessment of what I wanted out of my life, over the rest of my life, and as much as I enjoyed my work, and I've got to say, if you do something you enjoy, what do they say? Saying you'll never
work another day in your life.
You'll never work another day in life. And I used to wake up every day looking forward to going to work.
Wow.
Yeah. At the end of my time, I was the managing director of the production side of the New Zealand hothouse business. Any time had between 220 and 300 staff, not directly reporting to me, but through to the others. They came, I think I totaled it up one day, we had 22 different cultures, and because I enjoy people and I love dealing with people all the time, that's what I loved about the job. And I used to spend so much time in the glass houses just encouraging people and helping them with their problems and all those sorts of things. I did those sort of things. But I did decide that my grandkids and my kids were really important to me. So in 2019, I advised the managing director and chairman of the board of the company that I was working for that in about 6 months' time I was looking to ease off and do some other things. I actually think it was the right time for both me and also for the company. When you do a job, sometimes you actually get to a point where I didn't question whether I was adding value. I knew I was adding value, but you also need to think about other keener, younger people coming through, willing to take risks that you're not prepared to take.
Yeah.
And I thought, am I actually helping this business where I am now, or am I becoming a hindrance to things getting done?
Yeah.
And I'm not the right person to answer that question. But I think if you're asking yourself that question, then maybe it's time. The answer is obvious.
It's time.
Yeah, it's time. But
then you can't also work right up to the finish line again and go, out of here.
No,
because you have to manage that
transition.
Correct.
Yeah. So we did that. We had plenty of time, and as it happened, so I was due. I wasn't turning 65 until September of that year, but I'd planned a trip with a group of friends to go to Egypt, Jordan, Israel, and Dubai, leaving on the 29th of July. And
what year was that, just to give it some context?
2020.
Oh, yeah. I remember that year. Wow.
Yeah. And I was actually with one of those friends in March of 2020. We were actually up in Sabah, which is North Borneo, and I was planning to go and visit my son and daughter-in-law and my then and I had a new grandson then. He was only he was like 6 or 8 weeks old. And Sabah is a Malay state in North Borneo, right next to Brunei, and we were doing a 7-day trip through there, and then we're going to go to Brunei for 7 days and come home. Well, on day 6 on the trip, suddenly Malaysia, which Sabah is in, shut all its borders, and
You were left
dear
living in a
Jacinda
longhouse.
said, if you're not home in 4 days or 3 days, you won't get home. So we roared back to New Zealand,
Having paid
and I went
3
back to
times the
work
price.
because I was still I was going to go, but I decided that I'd finish it at the end of May so that I could go off on this overseas trip. But and I still did that. So I did that, and yeah. The rest, as they say, is
So you
is
haven't
history.
done the Egypt trip yet?
Haven't done that.
Top of the list.
Yeah, other things. Now I lived in Israel for a while, as I mentioned before, on the kibbutz. So I was really looking forward to traveling there with my friends and showing them some of the places I'd been to and lived at and things that I'd done. And some of them are less keen to go now. So it's
Well, maybe new travelling companions.
yes, yep. No, there's other people. So
if we start thinking about wrapping up this conversation, I've written some things down which we'll call Lexisms in the future, I think. One of the things that will stay with me for a long time was that, and we won't even try and work out what year it was, but in year 9, Form 3, you had the opportunity to learn the language of your ancestors.
And sorry, I'm going to say one of my eternal regrets is not having the opportunity to do that at Whangarei and not carrying that forward. And I'm in an hour as whether or not it might be a retirement project. Because I think it'll help sharpen my mind. I think when you travel a lot, one of the things you recognise is how dumb we are in New Zealand only having one language.
Well, we don't actually. We have 3.
But most of us only effectively only speak or use one. And one of the things I have learned is that people that speak 2 languages, they actually train their brains to work in different ways, and they're generally and they're good ways. So any of you young people that are out there that have you may be speaking English in your day-to-day interactions with your friends and that, but don't miss the opportunity to pick up your
We've
home
got a
language.
courier actually who said that she'll come and do some language with us, so I'm pretty excited about that. So that's the first thing that the importance of Aotearoa's language, but for those of us that whakapapa Māori, even increasingly important.
I just speak on that whakapapa Māori. That is something that I've treasured for my life. When I was at high school, Ngāi Tahu were always an iwi that have invested in their people. They did stop through the 70s because they needed all their funds to fight for their treaty claims and their rights. But when I first studied accountancy, I applied and got given a grant, and I think it was like $90 or something. But that paid for my commercial law textbook. And $90 at that stage was like a week and a half's wages. It was a substantial amount of money.
And they still do that with education grants. It's amazing.
And those things are out there. And if people do know who they whakapapa to, then I'd encourage them to look into that, to look at what opportunities are out there, what support you can get. As I've got older, I've become more and more interested in Ngāi Tahu and what they do. I'm a supporter and an investor in Whairawa, which is their kind of superannuation fund.
Some of the various enterprises are pretty amazing.
They are. They've been canny investors. They've had their goodies and their baddies, but generally they've been more positive. The other thing about them as an iwi is that they have identified where they don't have skills and employed the appropriate people from wherever.
That's the joke, though, in Māoridom, isn't it? That Ngāi Tahu actually, they marry the skills that are required.
Exactly, that makes good sense. So,
it's quite strategic. Really.
I whakapapa te marae to Kokorarata, which is Port Levy, and it's also known as Port Levy on the Banks Peninsula, and Onuku marae, which is in Akaroa. And I was in Akaroa first time probably 10 years ago. Went there, and if anybody ever goes there, I'd really recommend you go to the marae. It's just over the hill from the township. It's about a 4K drive. And it's amazing that the marae itself is spectacular. They've built an amazing wharakai, and the meeting house is spectacular. But there's a little tiny church about as big as this room there. And it's beautiful. And it's just to one side, and it's been there for more than 100 years sort of thing. And I'd often wondered about my heritage, but I opened the door and I walked into that little church, and the hairs just went up on the back of my neck and my whole body. And I thought, I'm home. You know, I really felt that. And I really felt that. And, you know, and that's encouraged me to do stuff more. My dad was a whakapapa denier. He was of his generation, you know.
Well, there was not much support for those things outside home.
Yeah. But one of my successes was in later years, I got him to embrace that, and he did, and he became very proud, and that's all you can ask.
Yeah. Well, that's number 2. Yeah. Whananga, whakapapa. Yeah. And then I guess the last rounding off that kind of origins thing in my mind was that Ōtara, and I see, you know, just like then talking about your whakapapa and, you know, being Ngāi Tahu, you also lit up talking about Ōtara and what a wonderful childhood and you know, the place that your mother cried to come home to.
Yeah.
And what a special thing that is too. I mean, I love this place. I go a bit spare when I haven't been around. And, you know, people are real. Yeah. That's what I love most of all.
But I think that's why my mum wanted to come back in. You know, like, it was that sense of community. You know, my mum got, I remember my mum being unwell and having to go into hospital for something when I would have been 9 or 10 or something like that, you know, and there were a list of neighbours lining up, you know, with 4 of us boys.
Yeah.
And
to feed you.
To come and stay and, you know, come and stay. And we did. Yeah. You know, we did, and that was just the community that we were in. I got to tell you one funny story about my mum. My mum
as well.
No, I don't know. My mum, bless her soul, had to put up with 4 sons and a husband, so she didn't have much female companionship in her life. And to make matters worse, her first 4 grandchildren were boys as well. So my daughter was the first female, and man was she celebrated. But in must have been early mid-70s, there was a cowboy program called the High Chaparral.
Oh yes, I remember it.
And my dad had some very good mates who were policemen based in Otahuhu, and they would time their dinners for the High Chaparral episodes wherever possible. And
that was the dinner break.
The dinner break, yeah. And normally they would normally grab some takeaways, and they would come and have their dinner at our thing and watch the High Chaparral. For their names will be nameless for them. But if they were running a bit late, it wasn't uncommon for them to put the flashes on.
Screaming down Harwood Crescent.
So they would come screaming down Harwood Crescent into our driveway, flashes on, kill the flashes out of the car, inside.
Right.
And my mum would go spare. All the neighbours would be hanging out the window to see what was going on in Dillon's house.
That's a lovely story.
And so yes, there were police visits to the house on a regular basis, but this is the truth behind those flashing lights.
So we set the truth right for the future. Anyone who remembers that.
Correct.
Okay, and then your life philosophies, I think, well, otherwise we'll go on for the rest of our life. But I'm just interested in that whole idea about different perspectives.
Yeah.
And, you know, flip the coin, for goodness sake, and have another look through a different lens.
Correct.
And that is the thing that's underpinned by speaking different languages, having a different cultural lens, it allows you to sort of flip into that.
Yeah, it does.
We had a conversation with what local detective sergeant, actually. He sat in New Zealand, and he said exactly that. As a young Chinese, he's a middle-aged Chinese, but he's lived here for all his policing career, and he is able to do that. So in a way that other people can't, because he works in this community.
Yeah.
And so just as critical as your experience, with the Icelandics didn't have any idea.
That's a little add-on to that fella. That fella I was having the argument with. He had one arm, like he had his arm just amputated below his elbow. And a lot of the work was quite physical, picking up cases of fish and everything. I was like this. And anyhow, I'm having yelling matches with this guy on a regular basis. But I did sympathise with him with his one arm situation. And I spoke to the manager of the factory and said to him, hey, old Uli out in the factory there, in New Zealand we have these like prosthetics things and they can, to help people like that. And he said, yeah. He said, actually Uli's got a hook thing that he has in it. He said,
like Captain Hook.
Yeah, like Captain Hook. He said, but the police have confiscated it. He said he likes his alcohol too much and starts to play up, so the police took it off him. So that made me calm down a little bit even more, my interactions with him.
Well, don't get out the hook.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, just two other things about philosophical things that I do that I think are worth trying and I think would be good for young people. And one is back yourself. Yeah. Stretch out and take opportunities and do things. I mean, I'd encourage them to travel overseas. When I travelled overseas, it opened my eyes. It made me realise just how lucky, what a wonderful country we live in. But you do learn other perspectives and other ways of doing things. Yeah. And I know that's not always possible for people because of their circumstances to do that. But if you've got, and I'm not talking about Australia, I'm talking about get out of your comfort zone.
Australia's like the North Shore.
Go up to Southeast Asia, have a look around there. You'll meet the most marvellous people. The food is unbelievable and it's cheap.
And eventually you learn to stand over one of those toilets.
Yeah, you do. You do. The other thing is, I never worry about things that I can't change. If I make mistakes. I've made far too many mistakes in my life. But once I've made a mistake, I don't sweat over it. I figure out how to get around it and how to move on for it. But there's way too more things. Why stress about something that you can't change? It's happened. It's done.
Yeah.
So what can you do to move forward? And man, has that helped me in my life, from personal situations when I no longer had a wife, to business things that I used to get into in that, and looking for solutions instead of problems. It's good for your spirit.
Well, it's positive, I guess, isn't it?
It's good for your spirit. And so it doesn't matter what position you are in life.
Yeah.
If you can't do anything about it, chill. Don't worry. What can you do?
Yeah.
Look for the positive opportunity. Look for the good, because there will be some good.
That's actually a really lovely place to finish, isn't it?
Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah, I think looking for good, and we're all guilty of that. We are all guilty of dwelling on the negative and dwelling on the things we can't change. Yeah. Well, that's a very nice little handbook you've given us, Mr. Dillon. Lex Dillon of Harvard Crescent. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
So much. And
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. It's brought back some really good memories. I mean, I so much enjoyed the drive that I had around Ōtara before I
Well, don't make it just a one-off.
Not these Tamaki, but they're all foreigners out there. I used to joke when I first started dating this young woman from Pakuranga. Over there, they've got Pakuranga Heights, you know.
Yeah.
I always used to say Harwood Crescent was Ōtara Heights. That was good. I actually, as I say, I tell you how
Still got the flashed houses.
how Ōtara I am. I got married in the little church on the hill.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, how gorgeous.
Yeah, that was good.
Not many guests.
Sorry? No.
No.
They're part of the plan.